Yo, it's BassQuest, and today we're going to talk about one of the more difficult areas for you to find and locate bigger fish during the fall, and that's flats. A lot of times, these bigger fish will stay on main lake flats. They won't push back into creeks. They'll stay on these huge, expansive areas where you've got shallow water. But what a lot of guys don't realize is there's key areas. There might be a mile-long flat, but there's migration routes on a flat as well. There's different areas where bass can key in and feed on bait and where they're gonna most likely stage up at. So today we're gonna kind of take a look at that, and I hope it helps you out. Okay, the first thing we want to look at is what kind of lake is good for this. And in my experience, these southeastern lakes like we've got all around me, a lot of them are great for this techniques, whether they have a lot of current running through them, like a lot of the lakes on the Tennessee River chain, or whether they're just another more natural body of water, doesn't have as much current, but it's still flooded. So what happens is they have like these little natural areas where there is already existing water, and then a dam system will be installed, and then the surrounding areas are then flooded to create the bigger part of the reservoir. I'm going to show you right here. Boom. So we're going to zoom out and go down here, and you can really see. So at the bottom end of Chickamauga, you can see how wide this is. Here's the original river channel right here, okay? Pushing down through here. Well, then it gets to the dam, and you can see in a tail race how narrow this is as it runs through the gorge. And there's really just, you can see kind of where the initial channel would have been. And that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for those areas that are created by the flooding, by the creation of the reservoir. All right, number two, we need to know which area is going to be productive, which flat is going to be productive, what structures, what cover makes up a productive area that's easy enough to break down that we're not wasting time in. So let's jump into that. All right, so the flats that I find productive, one that is on a channel bend here. As you can see, if we zoom in a little bit here, we've got these different little isolated areas on this flat, and it breaks off a little bit here, and then it breaks off into deep water. And so up in these different areas on the bend, that's always a good thing on any kind of current-driven, especially a current-driven fishery. When you get on those bends, that's a great way to locate fish. They just always will be sitting there because it's a great place where they can draft current and wait for bait to come by. And the other type of flat that I really love is a flat that necks down. So it can be a large, expensive area right here, but what happens is it's similar to how fish move to the backs of creeks in the fall. They'll actually move up these flats, especially upriver. The upriver side or the upcurrent side of it, for me, has always been the most productive. And they'll push bait and they'll push themselves up these secondary channels. So if we look right here, if we zoom in, there's a secondary channel running up this flat. And that can create all kinds of different things. One, it can create a reverse current. So the main river current coming out here, coming down, when it hits one of these creek channels, it'll actually turn like this and start to move back. And it creates basically what we have here is a very large eddy line, right? And so these fish will slide up these edges, and then what we're looking for is the key areas on those spots. So if you look right here, you see where these contour lines are spread way far apart. Anytime you see contour lines spread way far apart on a flat like that, especially on the Tennessee River, more than likely that is going to be a shell bed. And so that hard bottom area, and it'll also grow grass on it, can be key for that. And then, talking again about the spot on the spot, what we have to do at this point is say, okay, so this is the hard spot. These fish are going to be up this line, the shallow part of the flat here at some area, right? Well, I'm going to key in especially on these little saddles. Look at that little saddle right there, that little inside turn in that saddle. Right there, another inside turn. You see that? Those are key areas, the dead end part of this, the last little bit of deep water, and then we have another saddle right here. Super key areas this time of year. And they can be dynamite both when the water is normal and stable and when the water is high and flooded. What I noticed when the water really comes up, you'll have more current that'll actually just start to wash over these flats. And it creates something really neat where your reverse eddy, instead of being in this whole general area over here, it's going to be tighter to the bank. And so you'll still catch fish that are a little bit offshore, like on a point like this, but what's happening is the key areas are closer in general to the bank. So I'm looking at these inside turns. I'm looking at that point. I'm looking at this area over here around this dock. Those are the kind of areas I'm going to look for when the water is higher and dirtier. So I know a lot of you guys that fish like Gunnersville, Chickamauga, and Nickajack are wondering, what in the world do you do when these areas are choked out with grass? It's really common on these big expansive flats, on these hard spots in these key areas, that the whole area will become a grass mat. And you can see that if we swap over here to Google Earth. You can see the outlines of where the grass is. And that's the funny thing about grass. So it'll actually outline the structure that's already on the bottom. So when you're looking at your mapping, you have to treat it like an empty flat. You're going to go back over there. You're going to look for the key spots. So if we zoom in right here, we have these inside turns on these creek channels. We have this big shell bed on this part right here. We have shallower inside turns that swing around into here. So depending on where the current is going, depending on where the wind is, where we're seeing bait fish activity, we can kind of break down, especially looking at our mapping, where the key area is going to be in the grass. That way we're not wasting time fishing there, all over the place, when we could be going to the key spots trying to get where those big territorial fish are going to be. Last but not least, let's talk about the baits that I like to use to target these fish. If I'm on an area that's choked out with grass, that's got grass mats on there, I'm obviously going to go to something like a buzz bait, a frog, punching rig. That's going to be my go-to. But you also have to think about those farther outside edges, because these fish will use those travel routes and slide up and down, especially if there's fluctuations in the water depth. So in that case, I'm going to use a speed worm on a Texas rig. I'm going to use a chatterbait. I'm going to use a jerkbait, which that's one that a lot of guys won't pull out. And as it gets colder, when we start to actually get later into this fall transition where it's actually more fall time, getting cold, we got those brisk mornings, that's when I'm going to pull out something like a lipless that I can rip through there. Really lean on that chatterbait at that point. Those are the things that will help you get the bites that you want on these flats. I know these tips are going to help you catch a lot more fish this fall on the flats. If you want to watch another video, linked right here, is going to be the one that we just finished up about how to locate big fish in the creeks during the fall transition. And the next video after this is going to be the video on how to locate big fish in pockets. That's another one of my favorite areas to find them. Hope you guys enjoy. If you like it, subscribe. Hit that thumbs up for me. I hope this week finds you out on the water, and I will catch you there.